Big questions for the new Ferrari Amalfi. Does it look like a Prelude or a Prius or something weirder? Does it sound, as Ferrari claims, better than the old Roma did? Has adding buttons finally cured Ferrari of those nightmare interiors?
And is the cheapest, least powerful prancing horse you can buy actually the best to drive on a normal road? I've got a few hours with this Verde Costiera Amalfi to answer all that. So welcome back to the Top Gear channel, and let's go find out how much entry-level Ferrari you can buy for £202,000.
Doesn't feel like an entry-level amount of power, that's for sure. This thing is rapid.
To be exact, the cheapest new Ferrari starts at £202,459, but you can pump up the Amalfi's price tag scarily quickly if you play the options list game. Shall we play?
I've written a few favourites down here. This carbon fibre steering wheel with the shift LEDs, you're going to want that. £3,359, which sounds like a lot until you realise that the completely pointless passenger display over there, which you will have a crash trying to show off with, that is £3,919. If I just open my door there and then let the soft close mechanism latch it for me, that's worth £953. For your aluminium footrests, which are basically just recycled Coke cans with holes punched into them, £560. So you'd imagine the titanium exhaust would be like £1 million, but it's only £1,680. The Scuderia Ferrari shields on the outside, you can't show up to Cars and Coffee without those, £1,231 these days. I suppose what really stings is you definitely want the Magna Ride adaptive suspension with the clicky bumpy road button there. That's £3,500, which is fine. But if you want the nose lift system, so you don't scrape the front, it doubles to over £7,000. Since you're having a look at the outside, that slab of carbon fibre under the door is £5,822. The full carbon diffuser at the back in the most vulnerable position if you get rear-ended, £7,837. And you might think, oh, carbon, I bet that's where the really silly options kick in. But no, Ferrari is now a paint company. Paint is their main business. Building cars is sort of a side hustle that they do in their spare time. So this special colour, that is £8,316, but you could have a historic colour or paint to sample. And depending on how many layers of paint you want and how historical you're going, that's between £22,000 and £39,000 for paint.
But as standard, you get the 3.9 litre twin-turbo V8 from the Roma. Powers up 20 horsepower to 631 bhp because the turbos now spin 7,000 RPM faster, up to 171,000 RPM, and you go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 3.9 seconds. The top speed is 200 miles an hour, but Ferrari says what it's worked on most of all is the engine's sense of occasion.
So the engine, it doesn't have that kind of thunderous, overspilling character of the Aston Martin V8 Vantage, and even though the torque is very cleverly mapped all through the gears, it doesn't have the literally electric throttle response of the new Porsche 911 Turbo. But I really like what they've done with it, because at the top end, when you get up there, it's a little bit more 458 than I was expecting. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It sounds raw. And yet, at the low revs, that's where the improvements come, because you no longer have all that resonance and blare and flat plane drone that you got in the Roma, which actually spoiled it as a GT car, because you just wanted the thing to bloody shut up some of the time. As ever, the unsung hero of the Ferrari powertrain is actually the gearbox. They do the best paddles in the business. The response times of this 8-speed twin clutch transmission are just instinctive. And it's mounted at the back for better weight distribution. You still get a big boot. It behaves brilliantly in town as a full auto. It doesn't roll back on hills. It doesn't shunter in traffic. And then when you stick it in manual mode, and it is a proper manual mode, it never auto upshifts for you, it's absolute lightning. So your comments on the original walk around of this were pretty funny. I have to say, it looks like various Japanese coupes. You said it looks like a fish. We need to break into Ferrari's design department and stop them. Yeah, controversial, I think, and not as universally liked as the Roma, which ironically at the time people sort of didn't like because it had that weird hole-punched grille. So maybe this will grow on everyone. This is clearly the problem area, isn't it? These sort of tiny hidden headlights, which have air intakes above them to force more cool air into the engine bay. But it's this sense that the car's got this visor or this mask, because Ferrari don't like their cars to have a face anymore. So that's the problem, because if a car's not got a face and it doesn't have an expression, I guess you can't relate to it. It makes it unfriendly. And yeah, that's been the Amalfi's issue. I will say though, if you want to know how difficult it is to design a modern sports car for pedestrian crash tests, look at the squidge in your kind of front lip here. When you look at the rest of the car as a whole though, I think this has got some beautiful angles on it. I love the fact that it's so clean down the side. Look, there's not a single extraneous styling line in that entire panel. And the general shape of it, it's very classical, correct coupe, isn't it? You know, think Jaguar F-Type, think Porsche 928. Long bonnet, swept back cab, and then a short, pert tail. At the back, they've got the haunches, these huge shoulders over the rear wheels, absolutely spot on. And they've kept that nice tight overhang that the Roma had, which is actually really difficult to do with modern cars because normally you have to have huge amounts of filtration going on in here, which is what kills your exhaust noise. I guess the problem is now they've moved the active wing down from here to here, and the fact that the boot opens in this position, there's just one too many panel lines. You know, there's lots of cuts here and here and here and here. But ultimately, are you telling me it's not objectively a good looking car overall? If you are, give it a little bit of time. Like the Roma, like even the Purosangue and the 12 Cilindri is now for some people, they do tend to grow on you.
But you want to know something ironic? Inside, Ferrari's done the opposite of reducing design details to the bare minimum.
The steering wheel is a dramatic and immediate, obvious improvement. Just having buttons means that although Ferrari's interface is still fiddly, you stand a fighting chance of finding the sub-menu you want while driving. And although the Ferrari steering wheel has looked busy for decades now, it's actually incredibly intuitive while you're driving. Having the indicators here, having the main beam flash button on this little paddle, it all makes sense. And also, a Ferrari is now one of the easiest cars on sale today to turn off all the ADAS beep and bong nonsense. You just have a dedicated button, push that once, it brings up a menu, push it again, tap OK, it goes away, and then you're free from beep tyranny. Love that. Then down here, the Manettino switch with its wet, comfort, sport, race, ESC off and bumpy road mode is still the best way the car industry ever found of giving a car multi-selectable moods. And our old friend the starter button is back, because a Ferrari should have more sense of occasion to starting an engine than swiping to unlock a phone. There'll be an electric Ferrari soon. If you want to have a soulless car to turn on, stick it in that and we'll keep our anodized button. Then in the centre, this is all quite Dodici Cilindri because we've got a landscape touchscreen. The Roma that this car obviously replaces, that had a great big girder here. It was supposed to make the car feel like you were sat in a single-seater. Nice idea by the marketing department, but it just made the car feel cramped. And then balanced on top of it was a kind of TeamU iPad. The Apple CarPlay moves from being in the instrument screen to down here, which makes sense because your passenger can share it, and this screen is just crisper, it's faster to react. Like it, there's just the problem that it's quite low down in the car, as you can see, so your eyes have got to come a long way off the road, where you should be looking when you're driving, to come down here and then fiddle about with adjusting the temperature or the audio settings. So yeah, I'm going to nitpick with that. I'd sooner there had been more physical controls put down here. Speaking of some nitpicks then, what haven't they improved from the Roma? Well, although you've got physical buttons back on the steering wheel, there's still a touch sensitive panel here for the lights and the mirror controls. And yeah, when you're adjusting your parking, you don't want to curb your lovely forged rims. That's kind of annoying. The back seats are entirely useless. Have them as extra luggage space, of course, but if you do need to take the kids to school and they're running really late, use a Porsche 911 Turbo, not this. And then the doors, nice and minimalist, but there's kind of useless storage in there. I don't know what's supposed to fit in there, but usefully, I guess, the cubby hole under the armrest is quite deep. I'm sure some of you will look at the outside of it and go, it's riding a bit high, isn't it? It needs lowering, needs dropping down, take some of that air out of the wheel arches. But trust me, it's got all the wheel travel you need to attack absolutely everywhere. And then when you're bored of that, you come down the Manettino, stick it in comfort mode. It's unbelievably comfortable, compliant, and again, a great shape-shifting GT car. The brakes are worth a mention, because there is no physical connection at all between my foot on the brake pedal and the discs themselves. This is a fully brake-by-wire car. Now, I did ask one of the engineers, is this basically the soft launch of the self-driving Ferrari? Because if you have steer-by-wire, brake-by-wire, it makes it much, much easier to integrate, you know, adaptive cruise control and self-driving functionality, because you've not got to worry about hydraulic pumps and all sorts, you know, corrupting your algorithm. It's all just done electrically. But no, they promise that this has purely been done for performance, basically to help the car on track, because you get a very, very consistent brake pedal, and even when the brakes are getting hot, even if you're boiling the fluid, it can maintain a very steady, reassuring brake pedal for much, much longer. And I have to say, if you hadn't told me there was anything weird going on with the brakes, I probably wouldn't have even mentioned them. They feel consistent, they feel reassuring, and very, very powerful. You always have fun in a car that you can tell the engineers have had fun themselves setting up. And yeah, the Amalfi has that. I was talking to an engineer about it earlier, and he called it Ferrari's back to basics car. Because unlike almost everything else they're doing at the moment, this car has no hybrid drive, it has no regen to integrate into its brakes, it doesn't have any rear wheel steering, and although it's got a triple position active rear wing, it's hardly what you'd call a downforce car. I'll tell you what, it is bloody lovely to drive a new car in 2025 that is palpably better than the one it replaces. That used to be the natural order of things, but kind of isn't anymore. Most cars have either plateaued or are getting worse, getting harder to operate, more annoying, and more spoiled by legislation. But if you compare the Amalfi to the Roma, which was Ferrari's first go at this kind of entry-level front-engine V8 GT car, this is easier to drive fast, more trustworthy when you want to misbehave in it. It's massively easier to operate and use inside, which makes it nicer to travel in. It's less wearing long distance because the engine is less droney. I think the materials have taken a massive step up in quality too, and it's actually better value for money, slightly, until you play with the options.